Welcome and thank you for standing by. Today's call will begin momentarily. As a reminder, today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Also, if you would like to queue for a question, you can always press star 1 from your phone, unmute your line, and speak your name clearly when prompted. We ask that reporters limit themselves to one question. You will hear silence until the call starts.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's media teleconference on NASA's fiscal year 2023 budget proposal. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rob Margetta from NASA's Office of Communication. Today we'll hear from NASA's Associate Administrator Bob Cabana as well as Chief Financial Officer Margaret Voshaus. Margaret will walk us through some of the details of NASA's budget proposal. She will refer to slides through this teleconference. As this is an audio-only teleconference, the slides are available online at nasa.gov/budget if you would like to follow along. The slides will be the document titled Budget Request Summary. In addition to the Chief Financial Officer, we will have several members of NASA's leadership team with us on the call today for questions and answers. They are Bob Gibbs, Associate Administrator for Mission Support, Jim Free, Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, Kathy Leaders, Associate Administrator for Space Operations Missions, Bob Pierce, Associate Administrator for Aeronautics Research, Dr. Prasun Desai, Deputy Associate Administrator for Space Technology, and Sandra Connolly, Deputy Associate Administrator for Science. I'll now turn it over to Bob Cabana for opening remarks.
Thank you, Rob, and thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon for the State of NASA and for the rollout of the President's FY23 budget request for NASA. You know, I could not be more excited about the future in front of us. It's just an amazing time for America's space program, and this budget definitely puts us on the right course. Speaking about the near-term future, I know many of you might be wondering, but we're currently on track for our wet dress rehearsal for the Artemis 1 mission on the 3rd of April. That's looking forward to that. And it looks like the Axiom 1, the SpaceX Axiom 1 mission now is no earlier than 6 April. This $26 billion fiscal year 23 budget request is 8% more than enacted federal spending levels from FY22, and that's a pretty significant increase. It's also the largest request for science funding in the agency's history. It definitely reflects the Biden-Harris administration's confidence in the agency and its support for NASA's missions. And when I look at our vision and mission statement that's in our annual report, It's outstanding. You know, NASA's vision is to exploring the secrets of the universe for the benefits of all. And this budget is going to help us fulfill that vision. And our mission statement of NASA explores the unknown in air and space, innovates for the benefit of humanity, and inspires the world through discovery. I could not be more proud to be part of an agency that has that for a vision and a mission statement. With that brief intro, I would like to turn it over to our CFO, Margaret Vo-Schaus, who's going to go into the details on this budget. Margaret?
Thanks so much, Bob, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm pleased to share with all of you the President's Fiscal Year 2023 request for NASA. This budget request for $25.97 billion advances the Biden-Harris administration's priorities of strengthening America's global standing, driving economic growth, addressing climate change, and promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So everyone should be on slide 2 right now, where I'll walk through our request, which increases funding across all of our mission directorates to enable an integrated investment in U.S. aerospace innovation and leadership. This request provides $7.6 billion for Artemis to return American astronauts back to the moon and prepare us for human exploration of Mars. It invests over $2.9 billion to address climate change, underscoring NASA's critical climate role as a trusted provider of free, open, and accessible Earth observation data to the public for both research and societal benefit. It invests almost $8 billion in science to further discovery. This funding will support over 100 space science missions and 10,000 U.S. scientists through more than 4,000 research awards. Let's turn to slide 3 now. This budget provides $971.5 million for Aeronautics to enhance U.S. competitiveness in the global aviation industry while making aviation safer, faster, more efficient, and more environmentally friendly. It invests $1.4 billion in space technology research and development to develop transformative and cross-cutting technologies that enable NASA's missions and grow the commercial space industry. It expands funding for STEM engagement at $150.1 million to engage and educate a diversity of students in K-12 and higher education. It provides more than $21 million for NASA's diversity and equal opportunity efforts and represent broader diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility initiatives focused on NASA's workforce, our engagements, as well as how and with whom we do business. Let's turn now to slide 4. This nearly $26 billion budget request aligns with NASA's new 2022 strategic plan, which was released alongside our budget request. Our new mission statement, as Bob noted, encapsulates our intentions. NASA explores the unknown in air and space, innovates for the benefit of humanity, and inspires the world through discovery. And our request is further framed by 4 overarching strategic goals that are captured in this quadrennial plan. 1, expanding human knowledge through new scientific discoveries. 2, extending human presence to the moon and on towards Mars. 3, catalyzing economic growth and innovation to address national challenges. And 4, enabling current and future mission success. Within this integrated strategy-based investment portfolio, I'd like to spend some time to highlight 2 of these priority efforts, our Moon to Mars and climate change efforts. On to slide 5. And our Moon to Mars strategy starts with Artemis. Through Artemis, NASA has stimulated development and international partnerships to deliver new missions, vehicles, technology, support systems, and other infrastructure that will enable us to explore the moon and Mars. This slide focuses on the initial series of Artemis missions, indicating key supporting activities on and around the moon. If you start at the upper left of this chart, you'll see the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. It's been orbiting the moon since 2009 and has conducted detailed mapping of the moon and will continue to investigate the lunar surface and landing sites in support of the Artemis missions. Along the bottom row of this slide, we represent robotic landings at the South Pole that will scout and characterize the landing sites for the return of humans to the moon, particularly the Volatile's Investigating Polar Exploration Rover, or VIPER. If you go to that middle of the chart that begins with that blue arc, You'll see, starting on the left, the Artemis 1 test flight will be done without crew in preparation for Artemis 2, the first mission in the 21st century to put humans in orbit around the moon and rendezvous in deep space. After Artemis 2, NASA will begin buildup of the Gateway orbiting the moon with the launch of the power and propulsion element and the habitation and logistics outpost on a SpaceX Falcon Heavy commercial rocket. SpaceX has been selected by NASA to demonstrate human landings on the lunar surface and will conduct an uncrewed demonstration landing in 2024, followed by human landing as part of the Artemis 3 mission as early as 2025. Artemis 3 will return humans to the lunar surface for the first time since Apollo 17 in 1972, and Artemis 4 and 5 will continue crewed missions to deep space, including cislunar buildup and delivering more crews to the lunar surface. Now on to slide 6. So to achieve a sustainable lunar architecture in cislunar space and on the lunar surface, NASA will conduct a series of missions over the next decade. These missions will include multiple science and cargo payloads, will be enabled through industry and international partnerships, as well as partnerships with other U.S. government agencies, and will ultimately support science and technology and operations demonstrations for Mars. So following this chart also from left to right, the initial step in this process will see the first lunar surface expedition going through Gateway, which will continue its buildup with the addition of an external robotic system. The Lunar Terrain Vehicle will also be delivered to the lunar surface, greatly expanding the mobility of the astronauts on the lunar South Pole. As activities on and around the moon continue to increase, NASA will begin to conduct science and sustainable operations on the surface through purchase of crew landing services from the private sector. Gateway enhancements will also continue in lunar orbit with the introduction of a refueling capability as well as additional communications and viewing capabilities. To expand mobility on the surface even more for the astronauts, a pressurized rover will be delivered. The capabilities provided by Gateway will enable even longer missions on the surface. And to achieve even longer stays on the lunar surface, NASA will deliver a surface habitat that can support up to 4 crew for long durations, and increase power with fission surface power and extracting resources from the surface of the moon that will further increase the sustainability of lunar surface operations. And finally, to reduce risk and prepare for human missions to Mars, NASA will continue to conduct Mars mission simulations on the lunar surface and in lunar orbit on Gateway. Now, if we go to the next chart, I'll talk more about our Moon to Mars Planning Manifest. And this graphic lays out the major mission activities through the budget horizon of 2027 with milestones that are based on this 2023 budget request, as well as beyond the budget horizon with notional milestones through 2031. So you'll see across the top of the chart the calendar years, as well as in that first column, the lead mission directorate for these efforts. So it lays in the current Artemis manifest, which, to recap, begins with Artemis 1 and includes numerous CubeSats from NASA and our international partners. The next Artemis mission is shown in 2024, and that same year, SpaceX will conduct their uncrewed lunar landing demonstration. NASA will begin building up the Gateway in lunar orbit in 2024, and as early as 2025, we will launch Artemis 3. During this time, NASA's Lunar Communications Network will be upgraded to support lunar exploration, and we will begin a steady cadence of commercially provided landings with robotic payloads to the lunar surface, allowing us to characterize the lunar South Pole in preparation for human landings and to conduct science at multiple locations on the lunar surface. We will also be conducting many technology demonstrations to mature capabilities needed for transportation and operations on the Moon and Mars. In 2027, Artemis 4 will see an even more powerful SLS rocket with Block 1B and the Mobile Launcher 2 needed to launch it. This will allow co-manifesting of large payloads for building up lunar capabilities at the Gateway. So you'll see that annual cadence of Artemis missions will begin with Artemis 4, and a commercial lander will begin delivering astronauts to the lunar surface and enhancing lunar surface capabilities with each mission. Also in 2027, NASA and our international partners will begin a series of launches for the ambitious Mars Sample Return mission, launching samples from the surface of Mars in 2030 and beginning a return trip to Earth. A cadence of technology demonstrations will occur on the lunar surface, delivered by commercial landers, and capabilities critical for sustainable presence will be matured during this period, including fission surface power and a pilot plan for in situ resource utilization. All right. We move on to slide 8. I'll now pivot to our priority investments in climate change and how NASA's request strengthens our national capabilities to address the global climate crisis. This request includes $2.4 billion to support the Earth System Observatory and investments in sustained climate observations, as well as over $500 million to reduce the climate impact of aviation. It includes funding for an Earth Information Center that will renew emphasis on providing actionable, climate-relevant data and information to a broad range of users. NASA will coordinate with other agencies and partners to initially focus on prototyping capabilities for a greenhouse gas monitoring and information system that will integrate data from a variety of sources. And the goal of the center is to bring these open data together and to make them more accessible and usable to federal, state, and local governments, researchers, and the public. All right, I've now set that high-level staging, and let me dive into the numbers starting on slide 9. If we go to the next slide, please. All right, NASA's fiscal year 2023 budget request advances NASA's ability to discover, explore, innovate, and advance for the benefit of all. In the center of this slide, you'll see that blue box that vertically highlights the 23 budget request, as well as the out-year profile, and how our nearly $26 billion request is allocated down to the theme level. So let's move ahead to slide 11, where I'll dive into the proposed funding level and also highlight the strategic objectives that each request advances, starting with our exploration account. All right. So here on slide 11, you'll see our FY23 budget request for deep space exploration systems at $7.48 billion. This is a 10.1% increase over the FY22 appropriation. This request provides for the development of systems and capabilities needed for human exploration of the Moon and Mars. And with the reorganization of the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate in 2022, you'll see here 4 new theme-level accounts. So first, the Common Exploration Systems Development theme, formerly called our Exploration Systems Development. And then the next 3 themes were previously represented under the Exploration Research and Development theme. So I'll move on to slide 12 and walk through the Common Exploration Systems Development request. These programs are responsible for developing the 3 key space transportation systems that enable the agency's Artemis campaign. So on slide 12, you'll see this request for $4.67 billion, which includes $2.58 billion for SLS. And with this request, SLS will focus on successful completion of Artemis II and the preparation required for Artemis III and IV. We'll also continue development of the Block 1B upgrade for a new upper stage to the SLS. It includes $1.34 billion for Orion, and with this request, Orion will finalize assembling and testing Artemis II and deliver the system to Kennedy Space Center. And it will start installing, assembling, and testing the second crewed vehicle and continue hardware production for the third vehicle. And finally, includes $750 million for exploration ground systems. With this request, EGS will prepare launch infrastructure and operations requirements in support of SLS and Orion, and continue modifications to existing facilities, including construction of Mobile Launcher 2 and modifications required for the Block 1B launch vehicle. All right, moving to slide 13, talk through the Artemis campaign development theme, and these programs are responsible for developing the systems used to land humans on the Moon, explore the lunar surface, and prepare for Mars exploration. This request for $2.6 billion includes $1.49 billion for the Human Landing Systems Program. This funding will maintain competition for lunar landing services and support the development of multiple different lunar landing systems. It includes $779 million for Gateway, a platform that will orbit the Moon and support lunar landers and surface activities. It includes $276 million for XEVA and surface mobility. This funding will support the systems that NASA will use to explore the lunar surface, including the Lunar Terrain Vehicle, the Surface Pressurized Rover, and XEVA surface suits that will provide capabilities and lessons learned that will support future Mars missions. And finally, it includes $60 million for advanced cislunar and surface capabilities to develop strategies and identify technologies for lunar sustainability and future human missions to the Moon and Mars. Moving on to slide 14. The Human Exploration Requirements and Architecture theme supports development of human exploration campaigns to the moon and beyond, and will identify the exploration infrastructure required for Artemis missions and future missions to Mars. This program request of $48 million will fund strategy and integration efforts in support of Moon and Mars exploration. All right, we'll move on to slide 15, where the Mars campaign development theme is focused on those long lead technology challenges that will need to be solved in order for a crewed mission to Mars to succeed. This program request of $161 million includes $121 million for habitation systems to develop and test capabilities required for deep space missions, with a focus on evolving the next generation of environmental control and life support systems. It includes $27 million for human support and enabling capabilities to support crew fitness, health, and medical care, and $8 million for foundational advanced exploration systems to advance commercial habitation, avionics, flight software, life support, in-space refueling capabilities, and other commercial space technologies. I'll now move on to slide 16 and focus on the space operations request, which in FY23 is $4.27 billion. This is a 5.6 increase over the FY22 appropriation. Moving on to slide 17. The space operations request includes $1.31 billion for the International Space Station. This includes $1.04 billion for ongoing ISS operations, transportation, and research. And it supports the emerging commercial LEO economy and by expanding the breadth of researchers and companies using ISS. It also includes $266 million to enable long-duration human deep space exploration via research and technology demonstration. Moving on to slide 18, the space transportation request is $1.76 billion and funds NASA's partnerships with the U.S. commercial space industry to develop and operate safe, reliable, and affordable systems to transport crew to and from ISS and LEO. This includes $1.64 billion for the crew and cargo program to support a regular cadence of crew rotation and cargo resupply missions to the ISS, and $118 million for the commercial crew program to certify and maintain insight into commercial crew spacecraft systems. Now moving on to slide 19, the request for space and flight support is $975 million. This includes $529 million for space communications and navigation to provide mission-critical services to human spaceflight clients and commercial crew and cargo missions. It includes $151 million for human research program to understand and mitigate risks to astronaut health and performance during long-duration missions. It includes $102 million for human spaceflight operations to support readiness and health of crew for all NASA human spaceflight endeavors. It includes $94 million for launch services to provide safe, reliable, and cost-effective services for over 70 NASA spacecraft missions in various phases of development. It includes $52 million for communication services program to demonstrate the use of commercially provided communication services to support NASA missions, and $48 million for rocket propulsion test to manage NASA's rocket testing capability and meet U.S. rocket testing requirements. All right. On the next slide, I'll go through the request for commercial LEO development, which is $224.3 million, and will create a robust commercial LEO marketplace by enabling the development of safe, reliable, and cost-effective LEO destinations that are commercially owned and operated. In doing so, NASA will free up resources that can be used for future human space operations and exploration. This request will fund efforts including early design maturation of multiple commercially owned and operated LEO destinations from which NASA and other customers can purchase services, and a continuous U.S. presence in LEO, both with government astronauts and with private citizens to support NASA needs and the broader utilization of space. I'll move on to the next slide, which will focus on the exploration operations theme. And as part of the integrated Artemis plan, this theme was created to fund Artemis programs after they have completed their initial development phase and demonstrated their ability to move into production and sustainment. Beginning in FY 2024, the production and operations costs previously accounted for in the Common Exploration Systems Development theme within the Deep Space Exploration Systems account will transition to space operations under this new account theme of exploration operations. So this FY23 budget requests authority for NASA to transfer funds in FY23 from Orion Multipurpose Crew Vehicle to exploration operations for Orion production and operations up to $718 million, contingent on assessments following Artemis 1, which is why you'll see the request level shows to be determined. All right, on the next slide, I'll highlight our request for space technology. This request provides $1.4 billion, which represents a 30.7% increase over the FY22 appropriation. Next slide, please. And that will cover our the entire technology readiness spectrum and includes $525 million for the technology demonstration program, which will support efforts including continued flight hardware development for OSAM-1, completes launches and flight demonstrates OSAM-2, continues development of cryogenic fluid management technologies leading to flight demonstrations, completes fission surface power phase 1 design study and initiates formulation of systems final design, prepares the launch of deep space optical communication with SMD's host Psyche spacecraft in 2022, targets launch of the low Earth orbit flight test of inflatable decelerator, or LOFTED, in September 2022, and completes the first solar electric propulsion qualification thruster. It includes $472 million for technology maturation of transformational exploration technologies, including a lunar deployable hopper to access lunar craters and enable high-resolution surveying of the lunar surface over a short distance, as well as deployment of the first LTE 4G communication system on the lunar surface to support communications at greater distances, increase speeds, and provide more reliability than current standards. It includes $156 million for early-stage innovation and partnerships. These efforts will include clean energy and climate-related technology challenges, awarding transformative discoveries through the NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts Program, and innovation pilots. And finally, it includes $285 million for small business innovation research and small business technology transfer to partner with the U.S. small business sector. All right, on slide 24, we will take a look at the request for science. This request provides $7.99 billion for science, which represents a 4.9% increase over the FY22 appropriation. Going to the next slide, the request for Earth science is $2.41 billion and will enhance our understanding of the Earth system and our observations of climate change and its effects. This funding includes over $400 million in climate and applications research to improve our ability to predict climate impacts, weather, and natural hazards. It includes $212 million to support formulation of the Earth System Observatory missions to enhance understanding of Earth systems and to observe the effects of climate change. It includes $290 million to continue development of high-priority missions such as GeoCarb, PACE, Clario Pathfinder, NISAR, and SWAT. It includes funding for greenhouse gas monitoring and wildfires technology and applications development in collaboration with other agencies. It continues the competitive Earth System Explorers Program and Earth Venture Class missions, and will collaborate with commercial small-sat constellations to acquire Earth science observation data to augment or complement NASA observations. On the next slide, I'll cover our request for planetary science, which is $3.16 billion, and will explore the planetary bodies of our solar system. This funding includes $822 million to continue development of the Mars Sample Return mission, which will return surface samples to Earth. It includes $486 million for the Lunar Discovery and Exploration Program, which with industry partners will deliver instruments and other payloads to the Moon, including the Viper lunar rover. It includes $230 million for a competitive discovery program, including newly selected Da Vinci and Veritas missions to Venus. It includes $88 million for the Planetary Defense Program to study near-Earth objects, detection and mitigation, including the Near-Earth Object Surveyor mission for launch no earlier than 2028. Finally, it includes funding to explore new destinations in the solar system, including Europa Clipper, Psyche, and Dragonfly missions. Moving on to the next slide, I'll talk about our request for astrophysics, which at $1.56 billion will study the universe and search for Earth-like planets. This funding supports operations for the James Webb Space Telescope, the Hubble Telescope, and the Chandra X-ray Observatory. It also includes $482 million for the development of the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope to explore and better our understanding of dark energy, exoplanets, and infrared astrophysics. It includes $246 million for a competitive Explorer program, including SPHEREX and the newly selected Compton Spectrometer and Imager mission, with new selections approximately every 3 years. It proposes termination and orderly shutdown of SOFIA, consistent with Decadal Survey 2020 recommendations. And it provides funding for precursor science and technology as recommended in the 2020 Decadal Survey, and initiates the first astrophysics probe class mission. All right, we'll move on to the next slide and cover our request for heliophysics, which at $760.2 million will study the sun and its influence throughout the solar system. This funding includes $184 million to develop the Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe and the Geospace Dynamics Constellation mission. It establishes a new space weather program focused on space weather science, interagency research, and development of instruments such as Hermes to protect our technology and astronauts from space weather. It includes $158 million to support a competitive Explorer program, including 2 newly selected missions, MUSE and Helioswarm. And it funds our dry science centers and new investments in orbital debris characterization to protect critical space-based infrastructure and humans working in space. Moving on to the next slide. Our request for biological and physical science is $100.4 million and will allow us to better understand how biological and physical systems work by observing them in ways not possible on Earth. This funding supports continued annual solicitations of space biology and physical sciences research with emphasis in quantum science and thriving in deep space. It funds research platforms from ground to spaceflight with emphasis on ISS to advance science, technology, and space exploration. And will commission the National Academies to conduct the second decadal survey for biological and physical sciences for 2023 to 2032. Moving on to the next slide, I'll focus on our budget request for aeronautics, which is $971.5 million and represents a 10.3% increase over the FY22 appropriation. Moving on to the next slide, this request for aeronautics includes $289 million for integrated aviation systems to explore, assess, and demonstrate promising technologies at an integrated system level, including in flight. This includes funding for the X-59 low-boom flight demonstrator to demonstrate quiet supersonic flight, the X-57 Maxwell all-electric aircraft, and early designs of the sustainable flight demonstrator. It includes $253 million for advanced air vehicles to meet the nation's long-term civil aviation needs, including research on efficient aircraft and propulsion technologies to reduce carbon emissions. It includes $156 million for transformative aero concepts to support revolutionary aviation concepts, including exploring opportunities to create a net zero emissions aviation future. It includes $156 million for aerospace operations and safety to work with the FAA to modernize and transform the National Air Traffic Management System. And it includes $117 million for aerosciences evaluation and test capabilities to support critical national ground test infrastructure, including wind tunnels and propulsion test facilities. I'll move now to the next slide, which highlights our 23 budget request for STEM engagement, which at $150.1 million represents a 9.6% increase over our FY22 appropriation. On the next slide, OSTEM invests in engaging students, educators, and educational institutions to attract diverse groups of students into STEM. These efforts will focus on broadening student participation, enhancing the K-12 portfolio of student learning activities, bolstering internships and other direct student learning opportunities, and expanding initiatives to attract and retain underserved and underrepresented students in STEM fields. This request includes $57 million for NASA space grants, $48.1 million for Minority University Research Education Program, $26 million for EPSCoR, and $19.1 million for Next Gen STEM. Now I'll move on to our next slide, where we profile the FY23 budget request for Safety, Security, and Mission Services, which at $3.2 billion represents a 6.2% increase over the FY22 appropriation. And we also request $424.3 million for construction and environmental compliance and restoration, which is a 3.4% increase over the FY22 appropriation. On the next slide, the Safety, Security, and Mission Services account supports NASA's foundational capabilities, and this request for SSMS includes $859 million for engineering, safety, and operations for all NASA centers, $761 million for mission-enabling services to manage NASA's enterprise business operations and mission support activities, $726 million for infrastructure and technical capabilities, $667 million for the Information Technology Program to modernize our IT capabilities and provide strategic cybersecurity risk management, and $195 million for agency technical authority to ensure safety and mission success. Moving on to the next slide, the Construction and Environmental Compliance and Restoration account funds capital repairs and improvements to NASA's infrastructure, as well as environmental compliance and restoration. This budget takes a risk-based approach to balancing our investments in maintenance, repair, and construction against a backlog of deferred maintenance. The request for seeker includes $241 million to construct, repair, or revitalize institutional infrastructure that support capabilities across all centers, $86 million to support the SLS, Orion, and EGS programs, $21 million to support space communications and navigation, the ISS program, and the Launch Services program, and $76 million to maintain NASA's environmental stewardship responsibilities. All right. For my last slide, I think the copy might be out of order, but if I could draw your attention, there was an earlier slide in your deck that looked like a stacked bar chart with lots of colored segments. I believe it might have been around slide 4 or 5, but if you'll bear with me, I wanted that to be my last slide and to leave you with the picture of NASA's Mission Planning Manifest through FY 2027. So I hope folks are able to catch up and find that slide. It's a really lovely capstone that represents it's slide 9. Thank you. And it represents the stunning breadth of mission delivery that's supported by this FY23 budget request. So you'll see that it represents a mix of human and robotic missions, international partnerships, and highlights NASA's expanding approach to working with the private sector to buy services. And some of the key highlights of this manifest is you'll see at the bottom there are some stacked bars that are surrounded in a yellow line. Those represent our missions that support Moon to Mars. And you'll see toward the top of those stacked bar charts some missions that are surrounded by a light blue box. Those represent our missions that support climate. And then you'll see equally important bars in the middle that aren't highlighted with the color, and those just represent our other exciting missions that are not specifically tied to Moon to Mars or climate. So let me walk you through some key highlights moving across that timeline from left to right. In FY22, we've already completed 8 of the missions shown here, headlined by the launch and deployment of the James Webb Space Telescope. In addition, we have ahead of us this year, Aeronautics will conduct its first flight of the X-57 Maxwell, an all-electric spacecraft. Boeing will conduct the second orbital flight test of its Starliner spacecraft that will deliver crew to the International Space Station. And we will see the first ever all-commercial mission to the ISS and a science mission to the asteroid belt, and of course, Artemis 1. In FY 2023, we'll see Moon to Mars activity ramping up with a series of commercial missions delivering science payloads to the lunar surface as a service, as well as multiple technology demonstration missions. We'll see the crew test of the Boeing Starliner, the first flight of a new cargo capability to the ISS with the Sierra Space Dream Chaser, and multiple science missions. We will also see the first flight for another new X-plane from our Aeronautics mission research directorate, the X-59 low boom flight demonstrator. In FY 2024, we will send humans into orbit around the moon for the first time since 1972 with Artemis 2. We will pave the way for the return to the surface with the uncrewed demonstration of the human landing system, as well as more robotic landers and delivery of the Viper rover to the lunar South Pole. There will be a steady cadence of commercial service missions to support the ongoing operations and research of the ISS, as well as several exciting science missions that will strengthen our ability to monitor the Earth's changing climate. FY 2025 will see the return of humans to the lunar surface with the Artemis 3 mission, the initial elements of the Gateway and lunar orbit, and additional robotic payloads delivering to the lunar surface. We will be sending another explorer to the outer solar system with the Europa Clipper mission. We'll see several new missions to study the sun and the solar wind, as well as other exciting missions from our science directorate. ISS support missions will continue, and Aeronautics will demonstrate an electrified powertrain that will enable aircraft propelled by megawatt-class power systems. In FY 2026, we'll see continued ISS support, build-up of the capabilities of Gateway, and continued lunar technology demonstrations supported by commercial robotic landers. And finally, in FY 27, we will see the introduction of the powerful SLS Block 1B with the Artemis 4 mission, a lunar terrain vehicle, and demonstrations of technologies needed to extract resources from the moon. Exciting science missions include the Roman Space Telescope and Dragonfly, a robotic rotorcraft that will explore the surface of Titan, the largest moon of Saturn. So that concludes my briefing on NASA's FY 2023 budget request. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I'll now hand it back to Rob to go through some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And now we'll open this teleconference up to members of the media for their questions. If the operator can come in.
Thank you. We will now begin our question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question over the phone line, please press *1 from your phone, unmute your line, and speak your name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. We ask that each reporter limit themselves to one question. If you would like to withdraw your question, press *2. Again, to ask a question over the phone line, please press then 1. Our first question comes from Jeff Faust from Space News. Your line is open.
Hey, good afternoon. Last week, NASA announced the Sustaining Lunar Development Program to develop a second lunar lander alongside the existing HLS Option A award to SpaceX. I see the budget includes nearly $1.5 billion for HLS. How does that break out between the existing Option A award and what NASA anticipates spending on the new Sustaining Lunar Development Program? Thank you.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for the question and certainly the interest in the lander development. That total dollar value there includes what we have for SpaceX for Option A, our internal workforce, and what we're planning for the development. Unfortunately, I can't break that out for you, but all of those are in there, and then that Option A is included in the run out through 25.
Our next question comes from Eric Berger from Ars Technica. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for doing this. So I noted the extra funding for HLS and spacesuits. So a question here, I guess, for Bob Cabana or Jim Free. If Congress funds this budget, is NASA going to have all the funding it needs for the major initiatives to carry out Artemis 3? Basically, do you have everything you need now if Congress funds this to fly that mission, or is there other budget or other monies you're going to need, outside of this new starts, that kind of thing? And then second, if the budget is fully funding, can you commit to flying this mission in 2025 now that the money seems to be in line? Thank you.
So, Eric, I guess I'll go first and Jim can join in. But for Artemis 3, this would fund our ability to have the SpaceX lander under Option A as well as the suits. Do you want to add to that, Jim?
No, I think you hit on it, Bob. And to the second part, the commit to 2025, that's the date we announced. I think November 9th was that call, and I can tell you that every day we are working to get Artemis 1 off, Artemis 2 in 2024, and Artemis 3 in 2025. So I'm not sure what commitment looks like to you, but I can tell you I watch people come to work every day that are working to get to 2025.
Our next question comes from Elizabeth Howell from Space.com. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks everybody for your time. This is probably for Jim or Bob, but let me know. I'm trying to figure out the cadence to get to Mars in 2040, and I'm looking at, for example, the Artemis cadence, which is sort of relaxed until we get up to about 2028 in terms of the human landings. And also we're seeing a lot of shifts around in the Mars program, like for example, the sample return mission, as we just learned today, and some other news from before, has been slightly delayed. And so how are we going to be charting that pathway, I suppose, amid these two realities with Artemis and with Mars?
So I'm going to let Jim answer in more detail, but we really are focused right now on our lunar architecture and what we have to learn in order to be able to go to Mars. And we're in the process of pulling that all together. And once we have that, that's going to lead into the Martian plan. Jim, do you want to add?
Yeah, just to add some detail to that, definitely understand where you're coming from the cadence. We're trying to get to these yearly flights, get these early flights behind us, and understand how this vehicle operates, and then help us understand what we need to do before we go on to the surface. And then once we set our goals for the surface, that'll help us our planning for Mars. And every year we look at our architecture, and we're going through another strategic cycle this year where we're planning for those next elements that we need on the surface. We're going for the infrastructure pieces, which includes comm and power, as well as the elements to explore that then we need the time on, prioritizing our time on systems for Mars. So we start to lay in those elements each budget cycle. So remember, the budget request you see out here goes through 2027. And with our new org, we have a Mars box in our org where we're planning for Mars itself. So I think you'll see some of that continue to develop, and our focus is getting on those yearly missions so that we can get onto Mars as soon as possible.
Our next question comes from Paul Brinkman from Aerospace America. Your line is open.
Yes, thanks for doing this. So I have just a little bit of a change of focus to aeronautics. So I guess this is for Bob Pierce if he's available. The budget request would provide $972 million for NASA Aeronautics. I noticed that also includes $253 million for Advanced Air Vehicles program, which is a significant increase also. Can you explain what that program entails, and then where in the budget NASA's work on advanced air mobility, or the so-called air taxis, comes in, such as NASA's recent test with Joby? I believe that's a priority for NASA. I'm just trying to understand where that comes into the aeronautics budget. Thanks.
Yeah, this is Bob Pierce. Thanks for the question. On your first question on the increase for advanced air vehicles, that includes elements of our Sustainable Flight National Partnership, and specifically the increases are to fund our efforts in our compact, high-efficiency turbine engine core work, going to a ground demonstration in partnership, in a cost-share partnership with industry for next-generation turbine engines. And then the other piece is for high-rate composite manufacturing. So we recently completed our advanced composite project that looked at how to design and develop composite structures more rapidly, and now we're going on to the next element, which is how do you manufacture these at a much higher rate than is economically possible today to support next generation all composite aircraft, large aircraft development and manufacture. So those are a couple of pieces that increase significantly. We also have some additional ground test work on some of the advanced concepts for the configuration, as well as some advanced work in model-based systems engineering that contributes to that increase as well. So advanced air vehicles is a large part of our sustainable flight demonstration partnership with industry. On advanced air mobility, we actually moved the major project this year in 23 from what had been in the Integrated Aviation Systems program. We're moving it to our Airspace Operations and Safety program in recognition of the fact that a lot of that work where we need attention on a national level is on the automation front. So the industry is well along the way on developing first-generation vehicles, and we are certainly continuing to support them in things like noise reduction and crashworthiness and things like that. But a large part of our effort is going to be in the how do they manage these in the airspace? What's the integrated automation architecture for that, ground, air, and so forth, and with the vertiport. So we're moving that in there. So that is a large priority for us, as you mentioned. We did an early round of tests with Joby this last year, and this summer will be our next round with Joby and with others, looking at noise and early integration, airspace integration work with them as well. So we have a number of partners that are across the country. We'll be starting our first set of what we call national campaigns, and then those will continue in the out years with ever more complex campaigns.
Our next question comes from Marcia Smith from SpacePolicyOnline.com. Your line is open.
Thanks so much. I was wondering if you could summarize what programs are being canceled or postponed in this budget. So I think I know of 3 that are all in science, but I was wondering if Margaret could explain if there are others elsewhere in the budget. And for Sandra, in science, you're canceling Ice Mapper, canceling Sophia, and postponing NEO Surveyor. Is that right? And if so, with Ice Mapper canceled, how are you going to replenish the communications infrastructure at Mars?
All right, thank you, Marcia, for the question. So yes, you are correct in the Sophia and Ice Mapper being canceled and the delays in NEO Surveyor. And regarding the comm infrastructure at Mars, so that is part of the Mars exploration program, looking at the resources at Mars. So obviously we have several on orbit right now, some of which are experiencing some challenges, but are also recovering from some of those challenges. And that is part of our long-term strategy to make sure we continue the support for comm on Mars. And there's also the commercial program that is investigating options for Mars. Oh, and ExoMars is also another option in partnership with ESA to support the lunar comm relay. Mars comm ray. Sorry, I've got the moon on my mind, not Mars.
All right, Marcia, you have a good eye. I think you summarized most of the terminations you saw for Sophia and Mars Ice Mapper. Among those delays, I will add there was a delay to the launch for OSAM-1. We're still looking at the pending date replan for that. A little bit of a delay also with the solar electric propulsion effort, as well as on the aero side in low boom flight demonstrator first flight and X-57 Maxwell first flight.
Our next question comes from Andrea Leinfelder from the Houston Chronicle. Your line is open.
Hi. I was wondering if Russia's invasion of Ukraine played a role into the higher request for commercial low Earth orbit development. Thanks.
So, Andrea, Bob, and I'll turn it over to Kathy on this, but no, our request for commercial development of LEO, we had planned on this all along, and that's a very important part of our path forward. It was great to get ISS extended to 2030 so that we could actually work toward enabling this commercial capability and have a destination in LEO once ISS comes to an end. But this was all pre-planned. Kathy, anything you have to add?
Yeah, this has been really in work for 3 or 4 years, was how do we continue to stimulate a LEO economy, and look at different ways to obviously leverage the ISS to grow it. And so it's why we, started the support contract. It's why we started private astronaut missions, and then also why we've invested in free flyers. And so that's been out there for the last 2 years. We're very happy. We're very happy with the request, and we were happy to see us get our full appropriations this year. That showed that there's support for this activity, and seeing this budget request there to the level that we wanted to have for us to continue to make progress on that is very key to us, making sure we don't have a gap with U.S. presence in LEO as we're moving towards station retirement.
Our next question comes from Aiden Quigley from CQ Roll Call. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for doing this. My question's on the Artemis program. $7.5 billion is in the budget proposal for that. How much was in the final FY22 omnibus?
Yes, thanks for that question. The comparable in FY22 is $6.8 billion for Artemis.
Our next question comes from Christopher Kokinas from Astronomy Magazine. Your line is open.
Yeah, thank you all very much. I wanted to jump back. Well, I'm having a problem with my phone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, sorry about that. I wanted to jump back to NEO Surveyor and wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the decision-making. I want to first confirm it was planned for 2026. I think I'm right about that, but now no earlier than 2028. Can you just talk about the rationale for delaying the launch? What other mission cost overruns are you talking about, and the effect of COVID on that particular mission and so forth? Just a bit more context on that. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, COVID has definitely impacted a number of our missions. This is Sandra Connolly, by the way. Both from a supply chain perspective as well as just development and the impact to, the personnel and all. So in terms of NEO Surveyor, meeting the requirements for identifying 90% of the potentially hazardous asteroids greater than 140 meters within 10 years after launch is something that we are still planning and striving to achieve. The situation is the delay is mitigated by our ground-based surveys. We conducted a KDPB in 2021, and at that point in time, the preliminary launch readiness date was projected to be no earlier than 2028. The KDPC, which is where we actually complete our preliminary design and make a commitment external to the agency, is scheduled for January 2023. In terms of the increases, the requirements for other missions, just trade-offs. Bottom line is it's a matter of prioritizing the portfolio across the board, given the budget, and there's other higher priority missions that we're implementing.
Our next question comes from Russell Pounds from Pacific Rim Media. Your line is open.
Hello, and greetings from Alaska. Great presentation, Margaret, and lots of good data. The question is for you, Margaret, and the subject is about creating buy-in from most Americans on space exploration. When you're making the rounds in the community or talking to the public, when is it that you feel the aha moment and the sense that the investment in space is worthwhile? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. I will offer that over Christmas, if you, like I, were one of many individuals around the world watching the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope, I think that when we deliver on inspiring missions that seemed impossible and are able to deliver those, that opportunity to inspire and unite is really one of the the really impressive things I've seen since I've joined the NASA organization. And I walked through quite a number of other missions that we are planning to deliver with this budget request. So I think that, you know, not only do we have that kind of inspirational and aspirational work in space exploration, but let's not forget that our work in space exploration also brings back knowledge and understanding and benefits to our life here on Earth, including the work that we do in the Science Mission Directorate to advance our understanding of climate change.
Our next question comes from Ken Kramer from Space Up Close. Your line is open.
Thank you for taking my question. I'd like to ask about the Artemis landing site selection. When are you going to decide to do that, and where it might be? You're still going for the South Pole, but I'm curious if you're narrowing it down at all. And with the follow-on missions, will they be all close to that original site, or are you going to scatter around the South Pole? Thank you.
Yeah, so the site selection process is a joint process that, this is Jim Free, by the way, that Exploration Systems will do with the Science Mission Directorate and with Space Operations, so that we go to the most scientifically significant place that we can land with the systems we built and where folks feel operations are the safest. So those will be the primary. Of course, we'll bring that forward to the agency for their approval. There are a number of sites that we're looking at today, all of which have some level of those criteria met, and we'll have to figure out how to transit between them, because we won't be able to launch necessarily at the same time, and there's very significant constraints getting to the South Pole with lighting and communication. So if we launch a month later than we did the year before, then we'll have to go to another site, figure out how to traverse between the two, perhaps in a rover of some sort, either unpressurized or pressurized, and then ultimately, as I said before, we're focused on science. So the science return and keeping our crews safe are our top priorities, and that'll be some of the factors that go into the site selection.
Our final question today comes from Joey Roulette from Freelance. Your line is open.
Hey, thank you for taking my question. I had just another question about the HLS section in the budget proposal. Does that only count for SpaceX's Option A contract and SLD, or are there other things in it as well? If so, can you elaborate what that is? And then also, I was just curious as to why that can't be broken out. A few of us have been hearing it's $500 million for the SLD, and I just wanted to see if that sounds accurate, or if you could break it out. If not, thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. This is Jim Free again. So first, we're not going to break it out, because then we give the number that is available for the procurement, and that changes how the procurement is run. So that's the primary reason. But I said, so there's SLD dollars in there, SLD both for both options that we announced last week. There's dollars in there for our workforce that supports HLS. For the task agreements we have where we support industry, and then the dollars to pay for SpaceX Option A as well.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, this budget is a really good start to the competition. This gets us on the right path.
And this is Rob Margetta from NASA's Office of Communications coming back in. We know that we probably weren't able to get to all the media questions, but anyone with additional questions can contact me after this call. I'd like to thank Margaret, Bob, and all the members of NASA's media team, NASA's leadership team that joined us here today. A replay of this call will be available in about an hour. You can listen to that replay by calling 888-566-0426. All of our budget documents are available online at nasa.gov/budget, And this concludes our teleconference. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for your participation in today's conference. You may disconnect at this time.